The afternoon sun streamed through the window, bathing the room in a warm, inviting glow. Maria and Pedro were on the sofa, surrounded by toys and family photos. Sofia, with her golden curls and pink dress, was excited about a children's book Pedro was holding, while Maria watched her with a loving smile. Sofia's laughter filled the room, and it was impossible not to feel the positive energy of the moment. Pedro and Maria exchanged knowing glances, enjoying their daughter's happiness. But behind that happy scene, there was a cloud of concern hanging over them. Pedro and Maria tried to act normally, but their worry was evident. Each time Sofia turned a page in the book, her parents exchanged worried looks, whispering softly about something that was beginning to trouble them. They tried to hide their anxiety to avoid ruining the moment, but it was clear that something was out of place. As Sofia got lost in the world of stories, Pedro and Maria stared at each other, sharing a fear they didn't quite know how to confront. The room was filled with love and warmth, but there was a shadow of uncertainty beginning to seep into the joy, leaving the parents with a lump in their throats and a sense that something needed to be resolved. The day was ending, and the room where Sofia used to play was starting to lose its luster. Maria and Pedro, still caught up in the routine of an ordinary day, tried to keep calm as little Sofia seemed less vibrant than usual. The cheerful atmosphere that once filled the house with laughter and movement was giving way to an unsettling silence. In recent days, Maria had noticed subtle changes in Sofia's behavior. The girl, who used to run around the house with energy, now spent more time lying on the sofa, gazing at her toys with a distant look. Pedro had also noticed that Sofia's appetite had decreased. Meals that used to make her smile were now met with worrying indifference. Maria tried not to read too much into these changes, convincing herself it might just be a passing phase. But seeing Sofia curled up on the sofa, with a dejected look and her toys mostly untouched, Maria's unease grew. She began to pay closer attention to her daughter's minor complaints. A stomachache here, some tiredness there, which, though small individually, seemed to form a disturbing pattern. Pedro, after a long day at work, found Sofia on a particularly difficult night. She was cold to the touch, even with the blankets snugly tucked around her. The way she twisted in bed, turning from side to side, and the uncomfortable look on her face were unusual. It was a sign that something was wrong. When Maria and Pedro met in the kitchen after putting Sofia to bed, the atmosphere was heavy. The usual comfort of that dining area seemed to have been replaced by a cloud of worry. Pedro observed Maria's worried expression and the anxiety she was trying to hide. They exchanged looks full of doubt and fear. The words about what was happening to Sofia were starting to form, but uncertainty still reigned. The conversation, initially focused on minor concerns and attempts to find simple explanations, delved into a darker territory. Sofia's health was clearly deteriorating, and the parents' concern was beginning to turn into something more serious and inevitable. The doubts that were once suppressed began to become impossible to ignore, and the need to understand what was happening became urgent and tangible. The day of the appointment arrived, and the waiting room of the clinic was quiet, except for the occasional sound of pages turning and the low murmur of conversations between patients. Pedro and Maria, with Sofia holding their hands, walked slowly down the corridor. Maria's gaze was lost in the soft decor of the clinic, trying to find some comfort in the seemingly welcoming environment. Pedro held Sofia with visible affection, his face marked by a worry he couldn't hide. Sofia, with her golden curls and pink dress, looked nervous but also a bit curious about what was to come. She glanced around with a mix of anxiety and innocence. Pedro encouraged her with a gentle smile, trying to ease her worry. Maria, on the other hand, kept her eyes fixed on the reception desk, waiting for their name to be called. Finally, the name Sofia Silva gently echoed through the room. Maria and Pedro stood up, and with Sofia between them, they headed towards the door leading to the doctor's office. The doctor's office was bright and well lit, decorated with soft colors and some children's illustrations on the walls. The smell of antiseptic was present, but there was also an attempt to make the space as welcoming as possible. The doctor, a woman with a serene and kind appearance, greeted them with a warm smile. She had a calm and reassuring demeanor that seemed to ease some of the tension in the air. Pedro and Maria greeted her, and the doctor guided them to a chair next to the examination table. With Sofia sitting beside her, the doctor began asking questions about the girl's symptoms, recent changes, and daily routine. The doctor's voice was gentle and attentive, trying to make Sofia feel comfortable. Meanwhile, Pedro and Maria explained the situation, their concerns, and what they had noticed over the past few days. The doctor listened carefully, taking notes and asking additional questions to get a complete picture of Sofia's condition. Maria, with a slightly trembling voice, described her daughter's complaints: the lack of appetite, extreme fatigue, and unexplained pains. Pedro, beside her, tried to stay calm, but his eyes revealed the anxiety he felt. They watched the doctor as she examined Sofia, her expression focused and careful, hoping she could provide some explanation for what was happening. The doctor examined Sofia with meticulous care, performing a series of tests and checks. Sofia, though a bit nervous, behaved well under the doctor's guidance. The interaction between the doctor and the girl was gentle and encouraging, with the doctor trying to make Sofia feel at ease. As the examination progressed, Maria and Pedro waited with bated breath, each second dragging as if it were an eternity. The sense of uncertainty was palpable. They hoped, with a mix of hope and apprehension, that the doctor could finally provide some relief to the anguish that had begun to consume their lives. The examination room was now silent, with the afternoon light filtering through the window and casting a soft glow on the walls. Maria and Pedro sat in front of the doctor's desk, their hands intertwined, while Sofia, next to them, played with a small toy she had brought with her. The doctor's face, which had been serene and reassuring during the consultation, now showed a more serious expression. The doctor sat behind the desk, flipping through the results of the tests she had ordered. The atmosphere was thick with nervous anticipation. Maria and Pedro exchanged anxious glances, their expressions filled with hope and fear as the doctor began to speak. "We have received all of Sofia's test results," the doctor began, her voice calm but with a tone that indicated the importance of what was about to be said. "Unfortunately, the results show something we were not expecting." Maria and Pedro's hearts seemed to stop for a moment. They clung to the doctor's words as if they were a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. Maria felt a cold knot in her stomach, and Pedro stared fixedly at the doctor, trying to absorb every word. The doctor continued, explaining that the tests revealed a rare and serious condition affecting Sofia's health. She spoke with evident care, choosing her words carefully to convey the gravity of the situation without causing unnecessary panic. Each sentence seemed to weigh more than the last, as the doctor detailed the nature of the condition, the associated symptoms, and the potential impact on Sofia's life. Maria squeezed Pedro's hand, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. The diagnosis seemed like a harsh blow, a shock that made everything around her lose clarity. Pedro, struggling to maintain his composure, tried to process the information, his face pale and eyes wide. The doctor provided a detailed explanation of treatment options and the next steps. She mentioned the need for further tests to confirm the extent of the condition and discussed possible therapeutic approaches. But despite the doctor's professional tone, it was impossible to ignore the seriousness of what was being discussed. Sofia, still playing with her toy, was oblivious to the tension filling the room. Her parents, however, were immersed in a whirlwind of emotions. Each word from the doctor seemed to reverberate within them, creating an echo of worry and uncertainty that felt endless. The doctor, sensing the impact of her words, tried to offer some hope and encouragement. She talked about the potential for treatment and the importance of a positive and careful approach. But deep down, Maria and Pedro were submerged in a wave of feelings, struggling to understand and accept the new reality that was unfolding before them. After the appointment, the world seemed to have changed around Maria and Pedro. The words the doctor had spoken echoed in their minds, almost like an unsettling mantra that couldn't be ignored. As they left the clinic, the daylight seemed more intense, as if reflecting the intensity of their emotions. They arrived home with an immense weight on their shoulders. Maria prepared a simple snack for Sofia, trying to act normally, but the gesture felt automatic, lacking its usual warmth. Pedro watched, his gaze lost in a distant void, while the sound of Sophia's laughter from the back of the house seemed almost surreal. As the days went by, the impact of the diagnosis was felt in every aspect of family life. The routine, once filled with relaxed and joyful moments, was now marked by constant tension and a sense of urgency. Maria and Pedro found themselves immersed in a new reality that required immediate and profound adjustments. Nights, which used to be peaceful, became sleepless and full of worry. Maria stayed awake, replaying every detail of the diagnosis and trying to make sense of what was happening. Pedro, for his part, tried to remain calm, but discussions with doctors and the need for further tests created a constant cloud of stress. The home, once a haven of warmth and security, began to feel the impact of the new situation. Sophia's toys, once symbols of joy, now stood as silent reminders of a lost normalcy. Maria and Pedro tried to create a positive environment for Sophia, but their concern was evident in every gesture and glance. Sophia, for her part, sensed the change in her parents' behavior, even if she didn't fully understand what was happening. She felt the difference in the home's atmosphere and, although she continued to play and smile, there was a new calmness in her eyes, a subtle awareness that something was different. Adapting to the new reality was not easy. Maria and Pedro began engaging with a multitude of new specialists, researching treatments, and adjusting their expectations. They dealt with a whirlwind of emotions, hope battling against fear, determination against uncertainty. Each day was a struggle to find a balance between maintaining normalcy for Sophia and coping with the new and difficult reality they faced. Conversations between Maria and Pedro, which once focused on future plans and daily concerns, now revolved around diagnoses, treatments, and possibilities. Tension and fatigue became constant companions as they desperately tried to find a way to adapt and face the new life that was unfolding before them. The home, despite all the effort to maintain a facade of normalcy, was immersed in an atmosphere of struggle and resilience. Each day was a new challenge, a new attempt to find hope and maintain strength, as the immediate impact of the diagnosis began to establish itself in every aspect of their lives. The sun was low on the horizon when Maria and Pedro arrived at the medical center, a building of glass and concrete that seemed to reflect the fragility of their hopes and fears. The hospital entrance was bustling, with a constant flow of people and staff, each immersed in their own world. For Maria and Pedro, the environment felt like a maze of uncertainties and possibilities. In the hospital lobby, Maria held Pedro's hand with a firmness that belied the tension in her eyes. They had received a referral to a renowned specialist, and the expectation that this consultation might bring some answers or solutions was palpable. The waiting room was filled with a tense silence, interrupted only by the occasional sound of a television in the corner and muffled murmurs. Pedro's face was marked by a line of concern, while Maria tried to distract herself with a magazine, her eyes skimming the pages without really absorbing the words. When they were finally called, the sense of anticipation and nervousness was almost tangible. The specialist's office was a welcoming space, with health books and a large window offering a view of the city. The doctor, a middle-aged man with a focused expression and a compassionate gaze, greeted them with a firm handshake. The specialist reviewed the tests and diagnosis with clinical precision, but his approach was marked by genuine care. He explained the available treatment options, a range of possibilities from traditional therapies to new experimental approaches. Each option was presented with technical details, but also with an explanation of how it might affect Sophia's life. Maria and Pedro listened attentively, absorbing each word and nuance of the explanations. The specialist spoke about medications, procedures, and possible side effects, and the conversation was interspersed with pauses where Pedro and Maria asked questions, trying to understand the best course of action. The doctor showed charts and images, trying to make the complex world of treatment options more understandable. He talked about the risks and benefits, and the decisions that needed to be made were not easy. The weight of each choice seemed to grow with every detail revealed. With each new option presented, Maria and Pedro exchanged looks filled with doubt and hope. The specialist explained that while there were a range of possible treatments, each had its own implications and levels of effectiveness. They would need to carefully weigh the pros and cons, considering Sophia's quality of life and possible reactions to the treatment. By the end of the consultation, Maria and Pedro were visibly exhausted, their faces a mix of relief and fatigue. The decision was no longer a question of if, but how and when. They needed to go home and discuss, reflect, and, above all, try to find a path that offered the best chance of treatment for Sophia. The hospital environment now seemed a little clearer, but the road ahead was filled with difficult decisions and unknowns. Maria and Pedro left the office carrying not just the information they had received, but also the weight of the choices they would have to make. The sun was setting as they left, and the sky darkened around them, reflecting the complex and emotional journey that lay ahead. The start of the treatment brought with it a new wave of challenges and obstacles. Maria and Pedro, though hopeful, found themselves immersed in a world that seemed increasingly complex and unforgiving. The first obstacle arose early on: Sophia's adverse reaction to the medication. At first, it seemed like the initial doses were having an effect, but soon unexpected side effects emerged. The little girl began to suffer from nausea and extreme fatigue, and the energy she used to have was replaced by a constant tiredness. Moments of brightness and joy became rare, overshadowed by a feeling of malaise and discomfort. Maria and Pedro found themselves running back and forth, dealing with frequent medical appointments and adjustments to the medication dosages. The frenetic pace of commitments seemed endless, and physical and emotional exhaustion began to accumulate. The nights were long, and discussions about the best courses of action became almost daily as they tried to find a balance between the hope for effective treatment and the real impact on Sophia's quality of life. In addition to medical challenges, there was a constant need for adjustments in the family routine. Daily activities were interrupted by hospital visits and treatments, requiring meticulous organization. Maria and Pedro tried to balance work demands, care for Sophia, and still maintain some semblance of normalcy for her. The stress of adapting to this new routine began to weigh heavily, and tensions between them increased, with arguments about how best to handle the situation. Finances also became a constant concern. The costs of treatments, medications, and tests began to pile up, and the pressure to manage unexpected expenses added another layer of stress. Maria and Pedro found themselves frequently doing calculations, seeking ways to cover the costs while trying to maintain hope that the treatment would yield the desired results. Sophia, while facing her own challenges, tried to cope with the changes in her life. She felt the difference in her energy and the need to undergo new and uncomfortable procedures. Maria and Pedro tried to comfort and distract her, but the reality of their new challenges was always present, visible in her tired eyes and the constant effort to find some normalcy amidst the chaos. The feeling of uncertainty and the weight of decisions became constant companions. Each day brought a new challenge, a new battle to be fought, and Maria and Pedro were in a continuous struggle to maintain hope and strength. They clung to moments of progress, however small, and tried to keep faith that, despite the obstacles, there would be a light at the end of the tunnel. As the journey continued, Maria and Pedro's resilience was tested at every step. They faced a whirlwind of challenges, from adverse reactions to treatments to financial and emotional difficulties. But their determination to fight for Sophia and give her a chance for improvement remained unwavering, even when the path seemed darkest and filled with uncertainties. After a period of intense challenges and endless nights, a gentle breeze of hope began to blow through Maria and Pedro's home. It was a chilly autumn morning, and the soft sunlight filtered through the living room curtains, bringing a touch of warmth to an environment that had long been filled with tension and uncertainty. Despite the recent difficulties, Sophia had a new sparkle in her eyes. The medical team had adjusted the treatment, and for the first time in weeks, there seemed to be a slight improvement. Maria and Pedro noticed that Sophia had a bit more energy, starting to show interest in her toys again, those that had been forgotten in a corner of the room. The little girl was focused on assembling a puzzle, her nimble fingers working with a concentration she hadn't shown in a long time. The smile that began to form on Maria and Pedro's faces was a mixture of relief and joy. They found themselves celebrating small victories with renewed intensity. A simple meal that Sophia ate with enthusiasm was met with enthusiasm and gratitude. Every step forward, no matter how small, felt like a significant victory amidst the constant struggle. On another occasion, the family decided to take a small trip to the park, something that had seemed impossible to plan due to the routine of treatments and appointments. Maria prepared a simple snack, and Pedro arranged the visit to the local park, a place where Sophia used to play. When they arrived, Sophia ran to the swing with a joy that touched her parents' hearts. The sun was shining, and the sound of Sophia's laughter mingled with the chirping of the birds, creating a moment that felt almost magical. Pedro and Maria watched with a mix of emotion and gratitude. Each laugh and every moment of play was a reminder that, despite the difficulties, there was still room for joy and hope. They took photos and captured these precious moments, knowing that each one was a small victory on the road to Sophia's recovery. Meetings with the medical team also began to bring positive news. The tests showed signs of improvement, and the adjustments to the treatment seemed to be working. The conversations with the doctors, which had previously been filled with concerns and doubts, now included discussions about progress and future prospects. These moments of positive confirmation gave Maria and Pedro the strength they needed to keep fighting, renewing their hope that, despite the challenges, the treatment was heading in the right direction. The small gestures of affection and encouragement that Maria and Pedro exchanged were also a source of strength. They supported each other, finding comfort in each other's words and actions. These small interactions, like a comforting hug or a word of encouragement, helped keep their spirits up amidst adversity. Each day brought new challenges, but the small victories and moments of hope were like beacons of light guiding Maria and Pedro through the darkness. These moments of joy and progress, though modest, were reminders that the journey, despite being difficult, was also bringing precious signs of recovery and the promise of better days ahead. It was a Friday night when Sophia began to feel unwell again. What seemed like a minor discomfort soon turned into something much more serious. Sophia, who had been recovering well, started to have a high fever and a persistent cough. Maria and Pedro tried to manage the situation with the prescribed medications, but the fever continued to rise, and Sophia's breathing seemed increasingly difficult. Desperate, they decided to take her to the emergency room. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Pedro was driving faster than he normally would, his eyes fixed on the road, while Maria, beside him, tried to soothe Sophia, who was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Every passing minute seemed to amplify the anxiety and fear that dominated the car's atmosphere. At the hospital, the situation quickly took a turn for the worse. The medical team performed a series of urgent tests, and Maria and Pedro were in the waiting room, watching the clock and exchanging nervous glances. The atmosphere was filled with palpable tension, and the murmur of other patients' conversations seemed distant and irrelevant to what they were facing. After what felt like an eternity, the on-call doctor approached Maria and Pedro, her face reflecting a gravity that could not be ignored. She spoke in a calm voice, but there was a weight in each word that made it even harder to hear. Sophia's condition was critical. The high fever and respiratory issues indicated a serious complication they had not anticipated. Maria and Pedro listened to the doctor's words as if in a trance. The diagnosis revealed an unexpected crisis, something that further complicated Sophia's already delicate situation. The hope they had built with small victories was shattered by this new reality, and the sense of helplessness was overwhelming. As the doctors prepared Sophia for intensive treatment, Maria and Pedro embraced, their tears mingling with fear and pain. The words of comfort and encouragement they used to exchange were now replaced by a heavy silence, filled with anguish and despair. The scene in the hospital was bleak and desolate. The medical team was in constant motion, and the sounds of machines and monitors created a symphony of worry. Maria and Pedro were on the brink of emotional collapse, struggling to process the gravity of the situation while watching their daughter being taken to an environment that seemed distant and impersonal. The crisis and breaking point had arrived abruptly and devastatingly. The feeling of losing control and seeing Sophia in such a vulnerable state was almost unbearable. The struggle to maintain hope, even as everything seemed to be falling apart, was in full force, and Maria and Pedro found themselves navigating a turbulent sea of emotions, trying to find a way to face what was to come. The storm seemed to have found its way into Maria and Pedro's home, not just in the dark days they had endured, but also into every nook and cranny of their lives. After the crisis at the hospital, the sense of desolation was replaced by a vague feeling of confusion and hopelessness. However, as days passed and the dust began to settle, a new sense of urgency and clarity began to emerge from the ashes. Maria and Pedro found themselves sitting at the kitchen table, a table that had once been the stage for joyful family meals and relaxed conversations. Now it was covered with papers, medical reports, and research notes. The environment was a portrait of the internal and external struggle they were fighting, a battle between hope and despair. Maria looked at Pedro with tired eyes, but there was a renewed determination in her gaze. "We need to rethink all of this," she said, her voice carrying a firmness she was beginning to understand. "We can't go on like this, just reacting. We need to seek out other options, other opinions." Pedro nodded, his concern still visible, but with a touch of resolve. "You're right. We should explore all possibilities. Let's consult specialists, read more about treatments, and find the best path for Sofia." With that, they plunged into the task of reevaluating everything they had been through so far. The process was exhausting but also essential. They contacted new specialists, sought additional information, and began exploring alternatives they hadn't considered before. Each phone call, each meeting with a new doctor, was a small beacon of hope amid the darkness. The new path was not simple. There were intense debates and discussions about the best approaches, with each specialist offering different and sometimes conflicting perspectives. Maria and Pedro spent hours reviewing diagnoses and recommendations, trying to find common ground that could provide the best chance for Sofia. They also began seeking emotional support. They joined support groups for parents facing similar situations and spoke with counselors to deal with the emotional weight of their journey. These interactions not only provided new insights, but also a sense of community and understanding that helped ease the loneliness they had felt. Meanwhile, Sofia continued her struggle, but Maria and Pedro were more proactive than ever. They tried to balance the search for new solutions with the need to maintain normalcy for Sofia, involving her in activities that could distract and comfort her. Each small positive step, each new experimental treatment, was a small victory in the reassessed journey. The atmosphere in the house began to slowly change. The environment was less heavy and more focused on action and hope. Maria and Pedro, though still exhausted, found strength in their determination to do the best for their daughter. Each day of new research and each small progress in treatment renewed their hopes and offered a clearer perspective on the future. The process of reevaluation and searching for new paths brought not only a new direction but also a new perspective on what it meant to fight and hope. Amid all the difficulties and uncertainties, Maria and Pedro discovered a new strength and resilience, a testament to the courage and determination that, even in the most challenging situations, can find a way to emerge and move forward. The morning was clear and cold, with the first signs of winter in the air. Maria and Pedro were in the living room, where the first rays of morning sun filtered through the windows, bringing a new kind of hope that seemed almost tangible. Sofia was back home after the intensive treatment, and the house, although still marked by the scars of the battle fought, was beginning to breathe a renewed air of hope and relief. The atmosphere was filled with a mix of relief and vigilance. Maria, with an expression of concentration and tenderness, was organizing Sofia's recovery space. Small toys and favorite books were scattered around the room, ready to provide comfort and distraction. Pedro, on the other hand, was busy with the new medication routines and necessary adjustments, carefully following the doctor's instructions. Sofia seemed a bit subdued, but there was a difference in her gaze, a spark of determination and hope that had been overshadowed by pain and discomfort. She was beginning to resume her daily activities, albeit gradually and adjusted to the new conditions. The recovery process was far from simple, but each small advancement was met with renewed enthusiasm. Regular visits to the doctor continued, but now they were accompanied by a different feeling. The news was more optimistic, and the final adjustments to the treatment were beginning to show positive results. The consultations, which had previously been moments of anxiety and uncertainty, had become opportunities to celebrate progress and adjust plans as needed. Maria and Pedro were adjusting their routine to the new reality. They established a new way to manage time between medical appointments and daily care for Sofia. Each change in routine was made with meticulous attention to ensure that Sofia's recovery was not only effective but also comfortable and peaceful. Life in the house was starting to find a new rhythm. Although worries had not disappeared completely, there was a growing sense of normalcy. The house was filled with laughter, leisure moments, and small celebrations of daily achievements. Pedro and Maria, still exhausted, found a new source of strength in Sofia's resilience and in the mutual support they provided each other. Sofia, as the weeks passed, was starting to adapt to the changes in her life. The therapies and new treatments were having a positive impact, and moments of pain and discomfort were becoming less frequent. Her parents' determination and love were palpable, and recovery, though slow and full of adjustments, was beginning to show real signs of progress. As the family navigated the final adjustments and adapted to the new routine, the feeling of hope and accomplishment intensified. The path had been difficult, and the journey was far from over, but each small advance was a testament to the strength and courage that Maria and Pedro found within themselves. Sofia's recovery, though still a work in progress, was becoming a testament to the family's strength and their ability to face adversities with unwavering hope and love. The twilight slowly bathed the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Maria and Pedro's house was calm, enveloped in a serenity that seemed to reflect their newly found peace. After weeks of struggle and perseverance, the family was finally enjoying a moment of calm, and Maria and Pedro sat together on the living room couch, a space that now seemed like a refuge from all the trials and triumphs they had endured. Maria looked around, observing the small changes they had made in their home during the recovery journey. Every corner seemed to have its own story, from the photos of Sofia with her radiant smile to the toys and books now neatly arranged. There was a sense of nostalgia and gratitude, an appreciation for the little things that had been so important during the tough times. Pedro, beside her, had a thoughtful expression. He was running his fingers over a small photo album they had started to compile, documenting not only the highs and lows of the journey, but also the moments of hope and joy. With each page turned, they were reminded of how much they had evolved, not only as parents but as individuals and as a family. The journey had been an emotional roller coaster. From the early warning signs, through the crisis and moments of despair, to the reevaluation and new paths, each stage had been marked by challenges and small victories. The pain and fear they faced were not just distant memories but experiences that had shaped their view of the world and the value they placed on life's simple things. Maria and Pedro reflected on the strength they had discovered in themselves and those around them. The determination they had found in the darkest situations was now a constant reminder of the power of hope and resilience. The journey had not been easy, but they had learned to embrace each moment with a stronger heart and a more open mind. Sofia, now playing in a corner of the room, was a living testament to the strength and determination the family had invested. The laughter and sparkle in her eyes were evidence that, despite the difficulties, love and courage had prevailed. For Maria and Pedro, every moment of Sofia's joy was a victory, a reminder that the struggle had been worth it. As the day came to an end, Maria and Pedro were aware that the journey was far from over, but there was a sense of peace in accepting what they had faced and overcome. Reflecting on the journey was not just a way to process what they had lived through, but also a way to celebrate the strength and resilience that had guided them thus far. They knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but they were confident that, with each other's support and the strength they had found, they could face anything that came their way. The journey had been tough, but it had also brought a deep appreciation for life, for family, and for the ability to face and overcome adversity with unwavering courage and love. The house of Maria and Pedro was bathed in a soft, golden light typical of spring mornings, and the atmosphere of hope seemed tangible in the air. The environment, once filled with tension and worries, now breathed a new kind of normalcy, a sense of calm that had settled after weeks of struggle and adjustment. Sofia was playing in the garden, a place that had now become her little paradise. The flowers were beginning to bloom, and life seemed to vibrate in every corner of the outdoor space. Maria and Pedro watched from a comfortable spot on the porch, their faces lit up with smiles of contentment and relief. The new normal was unfolding differently for the family. Although the days of treatment and concern were still present, the routine had adjusted to include more moments of joy and rest. Each day began with a small celebration of daily achievements, and each night was marked by a sense of gratitude for the small victories achieved. Maria and Pedro had adjusted their priorities and found a delicate balance between caring for Sofia and taking care of themselves. There was a new rhythm in the house, a rhythm that was both calm and full of life. The daily tasks, now managed with a new perspective, were carried out with a renewed sense of purpose and appreciation. Family gatherings, now more frequent and filled with joy, had become an essential part of the new normal. Maria and Pedro spent more time together, sharing stories and laughing about the little things that might have been overlooked before. Family meals, now filled with conversations and laughter, reflected the positive change that had occurred in their lives. Sofia, in turn, was experiencing growth and development that seemed to reflect the love and strength surrounding her. Her parents watched her exploring the world around her with renewed curiosity, and each new step she took was celebrated as a significant achievement. The future seemed promising, and Maria and Pedro were beginning to dream again. With Sofia's recovery gaining strength, they started planning small events and activities that once seemed impossible. The idea of a family trip back to the park Sofia loved was becoming a tangible reality. Each plan and dream was now fueled by hope and the belief that the worst was behind them. Looking toward the horizon, Maria and Pedro felt ready to face whatever came their way, confident that they had built a solid foundation of love and resilience. The new normal was a celebration of life and recovery, a reminder that, despite the difficulties, hope and love could always find a way to prevail. The sense of hope for the future was present in every small action, in every shared smile, and in every step taken toward a brighter tomorrow. Maria and Pedro knew that, although life would continue to present challenges, they were ready to face them together, with renewed faith and a perspective enriched by the journey they had traveled. Click on the video being recommended to you now.